Welcome back to another episode of The Social Web TV, the internet TV show that answers the question, who owns your data? With these two simple words, you do. Last week was an historic week. We thought we'd follow it up with something even bigger at the Computer History Museum for the Internet Identity Workshop.
I think nowhere is it more true of the creed of who owns your data, you do, than all the people here. This is the groundswell of activity around user-centric identity, and where so much of the great progress on all of the open technologies we talk about has come out of. That's certainly where I've learned most of what I know in this space.
Well, and I think somewhere around the 8th workshop that's happened over the past few years, 2 of them a year, probably up to somewhere in the 250, 300 people who are coming together for 2.5 days, working collaboratively on a bunch of different problems.
And it really is the who's who here, from big companies, small companies, grassroots, different standards, and just a great kind of convivial atmosphere of getting together, figuring out these problems, figuring out where different communities should be working together, and always so much progress gets made. It always seems like the time goes by so fast.
And
cool.
This year's sponsored by Sunkist.
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll have, in the spirit of that, I think we'll have a series of guests on for a couple of short interviews. But before we do that, I want to draw attention to something really cool behind us. The Babbage engine, which is, believe it or not, a Victorian computer that's mechanical.
Designed by Charles Babbage, one of the sort of forefathers of computing back in the day. This was actually his second generation model, which he designed but never got a chance to build.
And he designed it between 1847 and 1849. That's not 1947, that's 1847.
And it actually works. It computes 7th order polynomials in a big table so that you can use that to approximate other functions, which, as you can imagine, in the 18th century was a very common need.
Except that the computer was never built in the 1800s. It wasn't even...
There was just blueprints.
No one knew whether Babbage's idea would actually work, and he ended up dying a sad, frustrated man. So we thought, what better way to honor him than a little bit of mention on the Social Web TV. Yeah. So shout out to Charles Babbage.
That's awesome.
All right, let's have our first guest appear through magic. And magically appearing, it's Max Engel of MySpace. Welcome.
How did he do
Hi,
that?
thanks for having me. Great to be here. Nice to be back at the Internet Identity Workshop and representing MySpace and our efforts on open identity, and to talk about sort of where we are with the open stack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly MySpace, you guys have been moving a lot in this realm, talking a lot about OpenStack and about becoming an open ID provider.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, when we started with Open Social and looking at an application platform, we're just moving more and more towards, this idea that we should be working with the community on these standards, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are these existing building blocks, and the more we can, work with people to do that, the better for all of us and the better for the web. So I think we're in a very unique position with, the Open Social REST, and then looking at our portable contacts work, which we were able to show off a working demo of yesterday.
MySpace is a portable contacts provider in the wild, so how's that for Agile?
Yeah,
and we knock them up.
That's right.
So I mean, we were able to get portable contacts going in a night and get that working, and now we've pushed that to production.
You already had OAuth, so...
We have OAuth, and then OpenID coming soon, so I think we're in a really great position, especially... there's been a problem with OpenID in the past that people have had usability issues, I think, with URL-based identity. But we're very fortunate that our users think of themselves by their personalized URLs.
MySpace URL, yeah.
Yeah, so everyone knows their myspace.com/ whatever their custom URL might be. So when we get to roll this out, I think we're in a really unique position. So.
And you were talking last week at the Widget Summit about just how many folks there are that are
it's
in that state.
Unbelievable, I think. Over 90% of our active users have vanity URLs, and so that's a staggering number. And if you look at the overlap with Open Social application platform users, it's around 30 million people. So that's 30 million active users who understand the open web and the idea of application platforms and identify themselves with a URL. And that's just such an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, it just seems like such a great case of the open stack, where a MySpace user naturally thinks of themselves as a URL with a profile attached, with a friends list attached, interacting with other sites, having things go back into their activity stream. So, incredibly mainstream, large user base that I think should be able to fall right into this whole world we're trying to build.
And especially with so many young folks using MySpace, folks who may not necessarily be huge fans of email and email addresses as the identifier. So,
a wave of the future.
All right.
Well, we're excited to be here.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks for having us on.
Now we're going to make you disappear
Keep
by
up the
magic.
good work. Why, look who's here.
It's Dick Hardt of Sxipper. Welcome.
Thank you.
Dick's been one of the godfathers of user-centric identity and OpenID for a long time and worn a lot of different hats. What are you up to these days?
Well, we're working on Sxipper. That's Sxipper with an X. And we've been working on having OpenID support in Sxipper. We're hoping to go and move the standard so it's a lot easier to make that happen.
What is Sxipper for people who aren't
So
familiar?
for people who don't know Sxipper, Sxipper is a free Firefox add-on that manages your passwords and fills in forms. Essentially enables people to sort of get some of the benefits of OpenID to sites that don't yet support it, but it also supports OpenID. So you get a similar experience with sites that have OpenID and sites that don't.
I think there's been a lot of discussion about, is there a role for smart browsers to help in this whole world? It's kind of tough with phishing and everything else for all these sites to play together. What do you see as sort of the opportunities and challenges there?
Well, I think the smarter we make the browser, the harder it is for the user to be phished, and you can go and get a lot more functionality as we move some things browser. So everyone's been trying to push stuff to the web, but myself, I'm a big believer that in user-centric identity, the user wants to be controlling their identity data, and that's one of the places where if you're going to aggregate it together, you want to aggregate it at the user's browser, not somewhere in the sky.
So is this something browser vendors are starting to look at, or are you really the one going out there pushing it ahead right now?
A number of people have been looking at it. Firefox was looking to support OpenID in Firefox 3, but it wasn't really clear what they needed to implement. And so I think as part of the OpenID community, we need to make it clear, here's what browsers can do to go and make this stuff work. And we learned a lot with trying to make it work in Sxipper, and it was actually fairly challenging. So I think if we lay that out, and if there's some extensions, that eventually the browser manufacturers will build it right in.
Seems like in mobile is another case where it's going to be hard enough for users to type in URLs and passwords and that sort of thing. And so having your mobile phone already has a lot of privileged information on it. It makes sense if it sort of knows who you are and can do some of that negotiation for you.
Yeah, and it seems like some of the things that would be needed for smart browsers as well as phones to do that is probably fairly
Some of the same stuff.
And a lot of our goal with Sxipper was really how do you enable people to go and interact with a site by being able to click buttons as opposed to having to type. Because that's why the web really took off, is you could click on links and navigate around without having to type in exactly what you wanted. Why can't we do that with moving around our identity data?
Yeah.
Very cool.
If you haven't checked out Sxipper, it's really useful. I'd be lost without it, so check it out.
We'll link it up.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Dick.
Yeah, thank you.
Magically disappearing. All right.
Hi, Eran.
Hey, Aaron.
How did you get here?
It's Eran Hammer from Yahoo.
Eran, one of the primary authors on so many of the specs we use, OAuth, XRDS Simple,
Yeah.
OAuth Discovery.
So
and some more to start with.
we've talked about a bunch of these in the past in terms of sort of building up some of that foundation of the open stack. Figure it would be interesting to hear some more about what's happening with the Discovery, XRDS Simple, XRDS.
It's kind of
all
the
that
glue
sort of
that
stuff.
binds us all together.
I'm mostly focused on Discovery right now. And Discovery is what gets you from either the identifier or an email address or or a web page to all those resources that we want to talk about, if it's address book or identity resources. And it really is the glue that binds everything together. And up until now, Discovery has been mostly developed with a very strict identity context or within the services that's being developed. And I'm trying to take it, a little bit out and make it a more generic, so that it can be used with really anything. And as more services come out, they can basically declare how they operate within that space. They can say, if you look at portable contacts can define, okay, if you're using Discovery, this is how you can find out more within Discovery. Basically, register itself within Discovery.
So what you're saying is then, like my OpenID provider could have like Plaxo say, David stores his contacts at Plaxo for portable contacts and sort of do that dynamically, updating my Discovery information?
So it goes both ways. Your own blog can then say, here's where my information is. Here's my address book. Here's my identity. Here's my OpenID provider, and so on. And the identity provider that you use can say, we are identity providers. We support OpenID version 1.1, 2.0. We support this extension. So each resource can describe itself and its relationship to other resources, and basically create this relationship between them. Very much like the rel equal me in microformats, and how we do it in terms of people linking to their own web pages. This will be for machines to link resources together and get a better understanding of what capabilities are in each of those.
Discovery is one of those areas that, if it works well, users never see it, but it's such an important thing because it's what allows the user to have control of where they keep their data that gets rid of vendor lock-in, right? So if everything in the world is pointing to Google for me, then if I want to switch over to Yahoo, I have to go change everything, right? Whereas if everything's going through my own personal website, for example, and I just update that, everything else already knows where to go. So that kind of level of indirection is a very important, empowering tool, but it's, it adds some complexity in the process. So it's something we all have to kind of figure out how to get right.
So where can people sort of get involved or learn more about what's going on?
So there's a bunch of names out there. If it's XRDS Simple, Gattis, there's Discovery in general. XRDS Simple, which is one of the subset of this, has a mailing list, and people can join that and join the discussion. We're trying to figure out here at the IW exactly how to move forward, how to take all these different pieces and have one coherent story to tell, so that all these emerging specs can just use that and not have to figure out how to do it on their own. We're also trying to figure out how this fits with just regular HTTP. There's a proposal written by Mark Nottingham and myself called Site Meta, which has been also proposed as a way to get to the discovery information for a site. So it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of very technical detail, but overall that's kind of where the community is right now.
Cool.
Great.
Cool, great stuff. Thanks, Eran.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome our next guest, Paul Trevithick. Did I get it?
You got it.
All right, from Parity.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the things we haven't talked about so much on the show is a technology which, sort of is most known coming out of Microsoft, which sort of their instantiation of Microsoft card space, but really more generically, the idea of information cards. So, a lot of things in the OpenStack we talk about are URL-based, or we're talking about things like email addresses or XRIs. But the idea with information cards is that sort of just as you carry credit cards and ID and things like that in your wallet, being able to do the same thing on your computer. So you go to log into a site, it pops up a dialog, you choose what card you want, and go from there. And there have been a bunch of different companies now working on it, big companies, little companies, open source, and Paul's really been in the middle of all of this the past few years, working on various open source projects. You now work for Parity. Sort of what's going on with all this?
Okay, so, first of all, one thing you said is they know it is card space. This drives me crazy. It's information cards is a neutral, open technology. And yes, there's an implementation called card space. And the new one that Microsoft put out last week or 2 weeks ago is phenomenally better than the first one. Which is
the Geneva release?
The Geneva, it's like night and day. And so it's an open technology. But in Higgins, we also have deep roots in the OpenID, XRDS, XRI world, and we think those two things go together beautifully. People think it's one or the other. It isn't one or the other. And in fact, coming back to what Dick Hardt said a minute ago, we think that a smart client, which, okay, in the card world is called a selector, but it's a smart client, can make both better. The things that you did with seatbelt, that should be in there. And I am a believer that the browser has to get smarter. But if you're willing to go there, then you can have card support, and cards can carry open IDs, and you can have validated open IDs, and open IDs can, one of the things we worked hard on Higgins is to have the behind the selector is actually a hosted service. Well, guess what? It's an open ID that identifies that service. So oddly enough, we think you should use open ID to get to your cards. In fact, we've been working on some protocols for how you provision card services underneath OpenID. So there's a lot of, I don't think people understand how they beautifully play together.
So I think since we haven't talked much about this area on the show, our viewers may not be all that familiar. So exactly what do these cards do? What sort of examples could you give?
Well, there's the usual stuff where a card could be driving like a Sxipper form fill, right? It's like it's got some data about you. And then the more interesting kinds of cards that Microsoft invented called managed cards is that someone else can assert something about you. Because in the real world, most things that you do is you wield the card. You didn't make the card. You show your driver's license to show that you're of age to get in the liquor store, right?
Or David's got his United frequent flyer and it says you're over this, and so you can imagine, a hotel. You present your United card, and it basically verifies that United says you have this many miles. Then they give you a discount.
That's right.
It's kind of a metaphor that users are used to, and especially in this mashup world, it's really nice to be able to take something that Party A said about you and tell Party B, and they can trust that Party A really did say that about you.
That's right, because it's signed by the issuer. And so you could think of these cards as like personas in some way underneath your OpenID identity and things like that. So The other thing I like about cards and OpenID together, in other words, identity, user-centric stuff, is that it's a platform for really cool new apps, really cool new user experiences. And just a few minutes ago, Phil Windley and his startup Kinetics just showed the integration of what can be done to personalize browser experience based on information from a smart client. And so what I like is the conversation starting to move away from the plumbing to what cool things can you do. And we said, you know, if you had a AAA card or if you had an Amex Blue card, how could your web experience be morphed and changed? And that really interests people. We think that will pull the technology along.
Cool. Well, and very cool. I love how Internet Identity Workshop has been full of this, bringing people together who are actually working on the same problem. They just may not know it, and they may use slightly different terms to talk about it. And historically, those communities can stay fragmented or even become adversarial. And I think one of the most impressive attributes of IIW and the IIW community is how well they're able to facilitate getting those people together and having them trade their ideas and what they've learned and then finding a way to go forward together. And I know that the OpenStack seems really clean and everything fits together, but that didn't happen automatically. It took a lot of iterations of exactly what you're talking about, of people saying, oh, you know, maybe we can actually make these two work together and maybe we are actually trying to solve the same problem. And that kind of community progress is something that just can't happen out on fragmented mailing lists. So it's so good to bring people together and just foster that community spirit.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely true.
So,
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us.
Interesting stuff.
Thanks.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Got Doc Searls
I never
with
left,
us.
actually.
Yeah, well, he never left. We left.
In some ways, he's been with us all the
Yeah.
time. As a show that always talks about who owns your data, you do. No one's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
passionate and eloquent about that than Doc.
Absolutely. I mean, you've probably all heard of CRM, which is customer relationship management, of really big vendors owning your data, owning your relationship. Doc's been working on turning that on its head.
Yeah, just we all have. Every time you get an unwelcome phone call during dinner, or you call for tech support and you go through the voice maze, you're dealing with a CRM system. You're being managed. You're part of a, you're in a customer relationship management system. What we want to do is create a vendor relationship management system, or just parts of the system, open source parts of the system, whereby we as customers can manage our relationships with vendors. That's the idea. So, cool. So I can manage my healthcare data. I can manage my relationships with my favorite, that's broken rental car agencies, because I hate them and they drive me crazy. And they know almost nothing about me, even if I'm a member of their club. There's so many things that are broken that can only be really fixed, I believe, on the customer side, because there's a proliferation of silos, of these CRM silos. So every single loyalty card that you have is an expression of the ownership of you and your data by some company that actually doesn't care about you very much. They just want to slow down the retail process at the checkout counter and maintain multiple tiered pricing and other crazy things like that. I think I'd rather come in with my come into a store, even drive past stores with my shopping list, for example, without disclosing who I am, but just that my money's good and I'm looking for these things.
Let them make you offers.
Yeah. Exactly, let them make me offers, Or I'd like to be able to say, hey, I'm in Mountain View for 2 days, I need a stroller for twins, I've got $300, who's coming through? We call that a personal RFP. There are lots of different places where VRM becomes relevant. The first place we're going to work on it, where we have a project going, is with public radio. We're providing a whole new business model for public broadcasting, in which the customer, the listener, can pay whatever they want for whatever it is, and it can actually work with the music industry as well. So if you I could go on. I could just mumble and blather away.
I say, do you see some of the stuff going on here at IIW as sort of helping with that mission?
Oh, sure. Well, what we use the IIW for is development. I mean, that's what the IIW has been about from the beginning. It's a place where obsessives on the subject of identity get together and move things forward. You got turned on here, and OpenID came together in a different way here, I think. Every single time that we have an IIW, then people don't just meet and talk. There's actually work that gets done. So, cool. I was at a session this morning, 2 sessions where a lot of stuff got done. So,
well, thanks a lot. It's you're
That's it?
providing a lot of direction and vision for us all.
Oh,
so.
thanks.
Yeah. So projectvrm.org.
It's at projectvrm.org, and we're now ahead of voltage regulator module and some other results.
Congratulations
So if
on
you just
that.
look up VRM, you're probably going to get yourself to Project VRM.
Awesome.
And that should work.
Thanks a lot, Doc.
Thanks, Doc.
Welcome.
All right, well, that was pretty cool. We got a lot of guests on in one show.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many more cool people here that we didn't even get a chance to talk to. So
Yep.
this is such a den of exciting things going on. That's why we're all so amped to be
I
here.
don't think we're done this week, are we?
No, in fact, it's a double header week on the social web TV.
There was
So,
too much good stuff for 1 week.
so instead of saying join us next week, I guess, oh, wait a minute, we're in a museum, so we'll have to do the ending a little quietly. So
Got one more day
join
of
us.
IIW and then Open Social Birthday Party.
Open
on
Social Birthday
Thursday.
Party. Join us for another exciting episode of the Social Web TV.